It's fascinating how a single offhanded statement can shape the way the entire world remembers you. For Leona Helmsley, once a towering figure in the American luxury hotel industry, a few carefully reported words transformed her public image from successful business magnate to the infamous Queen of Mean. You may have heard the phrase, "only the little people pay taxes," tossed around in pop culture. That line, reportedly attributed to Leona, became so embedded in public consciousness that it overshadowed nearly every other aspect of her life story. Yet there was so much more to Leona than that notorious quote. Her journey was one of restless ambition, reinvention, triumph, and tragedy. By the time she left this world in 2007, she had built and lost fortunes, inspired awe and resentment in equal measure, and left a legacy that even now stirs passionate debate about power, privilege, and personal responsibility. Today, I'd like to take you on a deep dive into Leona Helmsley's life, from her modest beginnings to the media storms that surrounded her, and finally, to her controversial place in history as one of the most talked about figures of her era. Let's rewind to the early 20th century. Leona was born Lena Mindy Rosenthal on July 4th, 1920, in Marbletown, New York. This was a time when the country was trying to find its footing after World War I, and the Roaring Twenties were just getting underway. Her parents were Jewish immigrants, her father, a hat maker from Poland, and her mother, a homemaker struggling to raise several children in an America that promised opportunities but also demanded back-breaking perseverance. The family was of modest means, frequently on the move in search of more stable work. In that post-war era, the idea of achieving the so-called American dream was all-consuming for so many immigrant families. They might have come with little, but ambition burned bright. As a child, Leona never stayed in one school for too long. Her father's job changes meant frequent relocations. According to a childhood friend who would later speak to a biographer, Lena had an inherent spark. There was something commanding about her even as a teenager. She was determined never to stay poor. She had grand aspirations, a sharp wit, and, as some folks whispered, a quick temper if she felt disrespected. Even from those early days, one thing was clear. She wanted more from life than what her parents could give her, and she believed that with enough drive, no door would remain closed to her for long. During her high school years, she briefly toyed with different name changes, seeking something more glamorous than Lena. She tried variations like Lee Roberts before settling on Leona Mindy Roberts, a name she felt had a more polished ring to it. This habit of reinventing herself would become a theme in her life. She discovered that in certain circles, a clever name and a bit of confidence could open doors that a shy, uncertain teenager couldn't dream of. By the time she left school, some reports differ on whether she graduated. She was focused on changing her entire life story. In the 1930s, the United States was in the grip of the Great Depression, and families like Leona's often found themselves clawing for any chance to climb the economic ladder. She might have come from humble roots, but people close to her said that even then, she despised the feeling of being poor. This resentment of poverty, some believe, fueled the tough persona she later displayed. To an older friend, she confided, "I'll never let anyone treat me like I don't matter. One day, they'll all remember my name." Though others didn't realize it at the time, young Leona was already mapping out a future in which she stood at the center of wealth and prestige. Her personal life took a few sharp turns in those early years. She married twice, relationships that remained largely obscure in the public record. The first was said to be brief and largely motivated by Leona's desire for stability. A relative once recalled that her parents disapproved, believing she was too driven by the idea of marrying up. When the relationship soured, Leona wasted no time in moving on, determined not to let a failed marriage slow her pursuit of financial success. She would later have a son named Jay from a subsequent marriage, though details about her early family life were overshadowed by her future marriage that would forever define her in the eyes of the media. By the 1940s and 1950s, the world was again in turmoil. World War II had reshaped global politics, and returning soldiers were fueling a booming post-war economy in America. Leona, always seeking new ways to climb the social ladder, found herself drawn to the world of real estate. It was a field that combined ambition, negotiation skills, and a keen eye for opportunity, qualities she possessed in abundance. Initially, she began as a receptionist in a real estate office, but it didn't take long for her to realize that she wanted to be the one in charge of deals, not the one who answered phones. She quickly transitioned to selling condominiums and cooperative apartments throughout New York City. Stories from that time paint a picture of a relentless go-getter who refused to accept no as an answer from potential clients. She developed a reputation for having a persuasive style, sometimes quite pushy, sometimes charming, but almost always effective. One anecdote that rarely surfaces in broader discussions about her life involves her ability to transform a dilapidated apartment into something that looked so luxe that buyers, upon stepping in, started talking about making an offer within minutes. She had a knack for staging properties, long before home staging was a recognized art. This remarkable gift for presentation and showmanship foreshadowed her future role in the high-stakes realm of luxury hospitality. During her real estate ventures, Leona crossed paths with a businessman named Harry Helmsley, a real estate titan in his own right. Harry was nearly 2 decades older, known for owning or managing some of the most prestigious buildings in Manhattan. He was married at the time, and by many accounts the romance with Leona was anything but simple. Yet they were drawn to each other's formidable personalities. Some who knew them say there was a mutual fascination. Harry was used to being in charge, and Leona was one of the few people who could meet him toe-to-toe without blinking. Over time, he divorced his then-wife and married Leona in 1972, thrusting her into a new world of wealth and status she had never before experienced. Almost overnight, Leona went from being a successful real estate agent to a key figure in Harry's vast empire. Together, they began focusing on hotel management and transforming underperforming properties into some of the most profitable and high-profile hotels in the country. The Helmsley Palace on Madison Avenue in Manhattan became their crown jewel, an address so exclusive that it boasted a grand courtyard and an interior reminiscent of European luxury. Leona threw herself into the renovation and management process, attending to every tiny detail, from the ornate chandeliers to the floral arrangements in the lobby. She believed that the success of a hotel was found in the smallest flourishes, the elements guests remembered. But she also believed in running a tight ship, demanding near perfection from her staff. From the mid-1970s through the 1980s, Harry and Leona Helmsley were synonymous with opulence. They were fixtures in New York high society and even rubbed elbows with entertainment figures, politicians, and the wealthy elite from coast to coast. Leona, who was now widely known by her married name, saw herself not just as a hotel manager, but as the face of her properties, someone whose personal standards set the tone for everything done under the Helmsley banner. If a staff member disappointed her or failed to meet her expectations, it wasn't unusual for them to be fired on the spot, sometimes in front of co-workers or even guests. Some employees recalled hearing her voice echoing through marble corridors, delivering a barrage of sharp criticisms, to anyone who fell short of her rules, which included how to fold the bed linens, how to greet a guest, and even how to hand a customer a pen at the front desk. This draconian management style, ironically, kept the hotels running like clockwork. Guests marveled at the sparkling lobbies, immaculate rooms, and impeccable service. Celebrity clientele enjoyed the lavish parties and the guarantee that every whim would be addressed. Under the Helmsley's command, property after property transformed into a gold mine. Yet behind the scenes there was growing unrest among staff who felt terrorized by Leona's temper. Words started leaking out, rumors that she verbally abused employees, humiliated them, and even withheld certain benefits or pay if they displeased her. Journalists, always hunting for a big story, began catching whiffs of the friction. The media's interest was piqued by rumors of a wealthy woman whose temperament matched the stony gargoyles decorating the city's skyline. Leona didn't shy away from the public eye. She appeared in ads promoting the Helmsley properties, extolling the luxury you'd receive if you stayed at the only palace in the world where you can check in. Her commercials often ended with her stating some variation of, "It's the Helmsley way," or "no way at all." This marketing strategy, while effective, also put her directly in the spotlight. The Helmsley name was everywhere, and Leona became the face of the brand. The bigger her public persona grew, the more sensational the rumors about her behind-the-scenes behavior became. It was the 1980s, the era of big hair, big shoulder pads, and big personalities. Money was pouring into Wall Street, and conspicuous consumption was practically an American pastime. Leona embodied that swagger and extravagance, which both intrigued and repelled the public. The turning point in her life story came in the late 1980s. At the height of her fame, Leona's lavish spending and exacting nature landed her in a legal quagmire. In 1988, she was indicted on tax evasion charges. Prosecutors alleged that she had improperly billed millions of dollars worth of personal expenses, everything from mansion renovations to household furnishings, as business expenses, effectively cheating the government of taxes weighed. Perhaps most damaging was the testimony of a housekeeper who claimed Leona famously declared, "We don't pay taxes, only the little people pay taxes." That line became a media lightning rod. While Leona denied ever saying it, the public was quick to seize on it as proof of her arrogance and disregard for everyday citizens. Coverage of the trial exploded across the nation, and the press relished painting her as a modern Marie Antoinette, living large while sneering at ordinary taxpayers. When the verdict was handed down, Leona was convicted of tax evasion and a handful of other charges. She was sentenced to prison, although the sentence was later reduced on appeal. That day in court marked a stark downfall for someone who had built an image of invincibility. Many people saw her conviction as a victory for the little guy, a symbol that even the wealthy couldn't skirt taxes without consequences. Others argued that the public only reveled in her downfall because she was a strong, opinionated woman who had dared to show an aggressive side in a patriarchal business world. To this day, opinions are split on whether she deserved harsher punishment or whether her notoriety caused the justice system to make an example of her. When she entered prison in 1992, she was in her 70s, and it was a shocking transition for someone used to living in penthouses and five-star suites. In interviews years later, some of her relatives recounted letters she wrote behind bars, describing it as a humiliating experience, but also one that taught her painful lessons about her own humanity. She missed her luxurious lifestyle, but she missed her family even more, particularly her son Jay, who would tragically pass away from a heart attack in 1982. Many believe that Leona's grief and bitterness from that personal loss contributed to her quick temper in the years that followed. One little-known anecdote from her time in prison involves her striking up friendships with a few fellow inmates who were initially terrified of her. They'd heard about the Queen of Mean from the media. However, the women who spent day after day with her saw a more vulnerable side, one who complained about arthritis pain in her hands, who was terrified of losing what remained of her fortune, and who worried that the entire world would only remember her for one reckless quip about taxes. A former inmate once recalled that Leona offered legal advice to those who needed it, referencing her own extensive dealings with lawyers. There was a strange irony in the fact that the woman infamous for terrorizing underlings in the outside world was, in some ways, offering a helping hand in prison. Yet these glimpses of softer moments didn't erase the public perception that she was haughty and cold. Leona was released from prison in 1993, but she remained under house arrest for a period, with her movements strictly monitored. By the time she fully regained her freedom, Harry Helmsley was in failing health. The man who had once been the visionary behind a real estate empire was now fading, and Leona had to grapple with an uncomfortable reality. Her power derived not just from her own talents, but also from her partnership with Harry. Despite the stress of the trial in prison, she stood by him, ensuring he had excellent care and that his legacy was preserved in their properties. Harry passed away in 1997, leaving Leona even more isolated. Yet she retained control over much of the Helmsley business interests, continuing to oversee hotels and real estate properties, though her days of direct hands-on management were winding down. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Leona's public appearances became rarer. She spent more time in private residences, occasionally traveling between New York and her estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. She still had the resources to live very comfortably, but her name was forever marred by that Queen of Mean label. During this time, she channeled some of her energy into philanthropy, donating to medical research, hospitals, and other charitable causes. But the public eye tended to gloss over these efforts, focusing instead on any drama or scandal that surfaced, no matter how small. She had made her mark as a mercurial figure, and that was the story people wanted to hear. Despite her rocky reputation, Leona's final years did see her forging a few surprising alliances. For instance, she worked with certain charity organizations that recognized her ability to mobilize substantial funds quickly. Behind closed doors, some of these charities reported that she was extremely gracious when she believed in a cause, particularly anything related to her son's memory or health initiatives. While she never fully shook her reputation, those who worked with her in this philanthropic capacity saw a more nuanced individual than the tabloids suggested. Leona Helmsley passed away on August 20th, 2007, at the age of 87. The immediate headline that dominated was not about her philanthropic efforts, nor her storied role in building some of Manhattan's most iconic hotels. Instead, it was about her dog, Trouble, to whom she had left a substantial chunk of her fortune. The media gleefully reported that she had cut several relatives out of her will, choosing instead to lavish millions of dollars on her beloved Maltese. Some found it outrageous, while others saw it as yet another manifestation of the controlling, acerbic personality that had long defined her in the public eye. Yet, for better or worse, it was a fitting coda to a life full of larger-than-life decisions that only fed the mythos around her. When it comes to Leona's legacy, it's a complicated one. On the one hand, she was a woman who shattered glass ceilings in the real estate and hospitality industries. She was instrumental in creating high standards of luxury in her hotels, something that shaped how five-star properties operate to this very day. Indeed, many hoteliers studied the Helmsley brand, to see what aspects they could replicate to maintain an air of exclusivity and top-notch service. She had an undeniable eye for detail, a remarkable business mind, and a capacity to transform a struggling property into a cash cow. Her marketing strategies alone influenced how hotels promoted themselves in the 1980s, infusing a strong sense of personality, flamboyance, and promise of an experience, rather than just a room. In that sense, she helped pave the way for future brand-centric hoteliers, and even certain celebrity chefs, who would later use their personal flair to sell an entire lifestyle. But on the other hand, the controversies can't be shrugged off. She was, by many accounts, a tyrannical boss. She relished control, and numerous former employees have spoken of the emotional strain of working under her. Some argued that her downfall was not just about taxes, but also about karmic justice. That if you treat people poorly on your way to the top, you'll have few allies left when legal trouble comes knocking. And of course, there's the infamous quote about taxes that, whether or not she really said it verbatim, will likely always be attributed to her. In a society that deeply values fairness and democracy, that alleged remark symbolized the worst kind of elitism and greed, setting her up as a cautionary tale. Yet if we peel back the layers of media sensationalism, we see a more nuanced human being, a product of a difficult childhood during economic hardships, a person shaped by the hustle and bustle of mid-century New York real estate, and someone who lost a beloved son and found herself facing the harsh glare of a criminal trial in her 70s. She could be cruel, yes, but she could also be supportive and generous to those she deemed deserving. She carried within her the complexities of someone who achieved unimaginable wealth despite starting from near nothing. Perhaps the extremes we see in her personality were the results of that intense drive colliding with the imperatives of big business and the pitfalls of sudden, enormous power. One fascinating, lesser-known event that demonstrates the complexity of her character happened shortly after her release from prison. An employee from one of her smaller managed properties was diagnosed with a serious illness and needed costly treatment. Leona, learning of it through the property manager, quietly arranged to cover a significant portion of the medical bills. She never publicized this act of kindness, and most of her staff never learned of it. It only came to light years later when the property manager recounted the story to a journalist, researching a retrospective on her life. This act doesn't negate the negative behavior she demonstrated elsewhere, but it reminds us that even figures labeled villains by public opinion have layers that don't fit neatly into one box. Looking back on her story with the benefit of time and perspective, we can see why she continues to fascinate people today. Her life touches on numerous American themes: the immigrant experience, the relentless chase of the American dream, the pitfalls of unchecked ambition, the seductive power of wealth, and the downfall that can follow hubris. She was a woman in a male-dominated industry who demanded respect on her own terms, refusing to play by polite rules. That in itself won her admiration among some circles, especially women who recognized the grit it must have taken to gain such prominence in real estate and hospitality. Yet her abuses of power, real or perceived, remain a stark lesson on how success can corrode empathy if one isn't careful. Modern audiences continue to reflect on her life because it mirrors so many societal questions we still grapple with. What do we owe in taxes, and is the system fair? Does charitable giving erase or offset the harm someone might have done? How should we remember those who achieved great things yet harmed others along the way? And ultimately, can a single scathing label reduce a multifaceted person to little more than a caricature? Now as it did when those screaming headlines about the Queen of Mean first hit the papers. In the end, Leona's life closes with a reminder that even the grandest palaces can crumble when confronted with hubris and scandal. But it also offers a mirror for us to examine our own values. Do we judge her harshly because we need cautionary tales to keep excess in check? Or do we condemn her because we see a bit of that same ambition unchecked and fierce within ourselves? There may not be an easy answer, but there's value in asking the questions. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.